Okay, no mai haere mai ki te tari, ko Aaron Jones tōku ingoa, he tūmu whakaraia hau ki te aro turu ki Tamariki. So my name is Aaron Jones and I've got the privilege of being the Chief Executive of the Independent Children's Monitor. We are one of the three agencies that have oversight of the Oranga Tamariki system, and our role is to listen to those that work in and experience the Oranga Tamariki system, combine that with data to get an accurate picture of how that system is performing. And I'll just hand to Claire and John to introduce themselves.
Tēnā tātou katoa. I'm Dr. Claire Ahmad. I'm the Children's Commissioner. My role within the oversight of Oranga Tamariki system is as the independent advocate for all children and young people who have been in or who are in state care and or custody up to the age of 24. And this sits alongside my broader role as the advocate for all children in New Zealand under the age of 18.
Kia ora tātou, ko John Allen tāku ingoa. I'm the Chief Ombudsman and have a responsibility and mandate on behalf of Parliament to investigate complaints by New Zealanders against the administrative actions of the state and state agencies. So it's in that context that we look specifically at OT and at the child protection system.
And it's those complementary roles that we hold that provide the sort of comprehensive oversight of the system. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge Dame Karen Patasi, whose 2022 report this work springs from. Dame Karen passed away shortly after we finalised this report, and we're grateful for having been able to share it with her. She was determined to see that her work resulted in the improvement of New Zealand's child protection system, and we are committed to carrying that work forward. I'd also like to acknowledge the whānau of Malachi Shubex, as well as the whānau of all tamariki who are referred to in our report. I'll start the briefing with an overview of what our report found, and then hand to Claire and to John for their comments. And finally, there'll be time to take your questions, and Claire and I will stay on following this press conference if you need. As I mentioned, 2022, Dame Karen released her report, Ensuring Strong and Effective Safety Nets to Prevent the Abuse of Children. She identified 5 gaps in the existing safety nets, and she made 14 recommendations on how those gaps could be closed. In 2024, we followed up Dame Karen's report, and at that time, we concluded that children were no safer as necessary action had not been taken. We promised to come back and check on progress, and this is that further check. Overall, the story is much the same. We're yet to see meaningful change. Again, we have concluded that tamariki are not yet any safer. In the 3.5 years that followed Malachi's death, a further 24 children were killed at the hands of someone who was supposed to be caring for them. This is the equivalent of a primary school classroom of children. As Dame Karen noted and as Coroner Anderson reflected last week, the gaps are not new and they have been the subject of many previous high-profile reviews, and these go back over decades. We note that in October last year, the government accepted all of Dame Karen's recommendations, and this is a first step. We now need careful and thoughtful implementation. However, it must also be done with the urgency that Coroner Anderson called for last week and that Dame Karen called for in 2022. So turning to our report, what you'll see is that it's in 3 parts. The first provides an update on progress to close the 5 gaps and the recommendations made by Dame Karen. And at the time of finalising, only 2 of those recommendations have been completed. One of which was to complete our review in 2024. Since completing our report, and a few weeks ago, an interagency hub was established at Oranga Tamariki National Contact Centre. This is a pilot program to improve information sharing for tamariki where their sole parents have either been arrested or gone into custody. This is a start. However, as our report outlines, even if the gaps in the safety nets are closed, New Zealand does not yet have a child protection system that can always respond when needed. And this is what the second part of our report speaks to. What the numbers tell us and what we hear from Oranga Tamariki staff, police, health professionals and community providers is that Oranga Tamariki is not always able to take the action that it should. We have a child protection system that is struggling. Social workers are not always able to get in the car to see tamariki, the tamariki that others are concerned about. And when they do, this varies from region to region. Additionally, we also don't have a well-resourced community sector that is able to step in and help to respond to reports of concern where the issues may not require Oranga Tamariki intervention, but nevertheless where help offered may prevent further escalation. And finally, in the third part of our report, we look at police and Oranga Tamariki practice reviews that have been completed for some of the 24 tamariki that I mentioned earlier. From the completed reviews, we have found that at least one or more of the gaps were present. And even once a child has died, system agencies are operating in silos, with reviews not done collectively, and information and insights are not shared. What Dame Karen called for was greater collaboration between government agencies and sustained, determined, and perhaps most importantly, bold change. In her words, as a society we cannot continue to allow a cycle of abuse, review, outrage and distress, and then retreat from the difficult challenges. I'll now pass to Claire.
All children in New Zealand should be growing up safe and well. In fact, the right to grow up safe and well is one of the most basic rights that all children in our country are guaranteed under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And yet, right now, this is far from the reality for some of our nation's children. As Children's Commissioner, today, this new report, it is essential reading for me. And it's essential reading for all who work across New Zealand's child protection system, within government agencies, ministers of the Crown, iwi leaders, kaupapa Māori organisations and NGOs across our communities. But reading the report is one thing. Making real change happen as a result of it is what is crucial and urgent here. As I did last week when the findings of the coroner about the death of Malachi Schubeck's were published, today I again acknowledge Malachi for the child who he was, the 5 years of his life, and how deeply precious he was to his whānau. I acknowledge their ongoing grief for Malachi and express my aroha to them. As you have heard, between December 2021 and June 2025, 24 children have died because of the actions of a person who was meant to be caring for them. 24 children. This fact must collectively shock us into action. Most of these 24 children, as you will find in the report, were babies. While the majority of children in our country are growing up safe and well, this report tells us again the hard truth. New Zealand has a problem when it comes to child abuse. We have simply got to get better at preventing child abuse here in our country. And it is going to take all of us at every level of our society to make that change. Growing awareness and understanding of the problem of child abuse is an essential part of prevention, and that is why I recently launched the Dear Children nationwide advocacy campaign, calling on all adults in New Zealand to grow their awareness of this problem and to commit to being part of the prevention that is so urgently needed. And as this report today so urgently highlights again, at the system level, a lot also needs to change. This includes better resourcing for families in whānau and addressing underlying problems like poverty, family violence, and unmet mental health and addiction struggles. And our system of child protection, it simply must be strengthened. Our children's system is a system under pressure, one with gaps. Opportunities to prevent harm, to prevent child deaths, they are being missed. This has to change, and with urgency. As Aaron has said, I am also pleased that work is now underway by government agencies to address Dame Karen Patassi's recommendations, and that this is being monitored and driven by the Child and Youth Ministers group. But I do want to emphasise that this work, it must be joined up. Agencies working together, putting children and their rights and needs absolutely central every single day. This work must be well funded. Clearly, the system is under strain, and it must be better resourced, including through Budget 2026. I believe that work can happen at pace and at high quality. Children simply can't wait any longer. And this work must happen in partnership between iwi, community and government. This is key for real prevention. Strengthening our child protection system must be supported over successive governments and across party lines, and that is why this afternoon I will write to all members of Parliament to draw their attention to this new report. The child protection system must also do something very simple, and that is to listen better to the children and young people who it exists to serve and to keep safe. At pages 40 to 43 of this new report, you will find the voices of the rangatahi of Pillar's Ngā Rangatira Mō Apopo Youth Advisory Panel. They are young people who have had a parent in prison, and they make it absolutely clear in this report how this has impacted on their lives and the kind of support that would have made a difference. I urge today, again, that decision makers across the children's system pay attention to these young voices. Their voices and ideas are a huge part of the solutions required to see the change that is so comprehensively and urgently needed.
The children protection system, as you have heard twice already, is under significant stress. The gaps identified by Dame Karen remain, and children are falling through them. While some progress has been made, as reflected in the report, the need for prioritisation, focus and resources is real. This must be heard. We can't keep coming back and saying this time after time after time. Nothing will change unless we start doing things differently. And that means, if we listen to Dame Karen, if we listen to the voices that are recorded in this report, if we listen to the many reports that precede this report, that means that we need to have collaboration across the system. We need agencies to be working together. We need information to be shared. And we need to start experimenting with different models, models which put more control in the hands of communities and community agencies, models which are in those places of deprivation and which can react to those places in which the challenging circumstances of so many whānau in this country are actually being played out day by day by day. And when you read this report, you will see glimmers of hope. You saw a glimmer with the hub that Aaron spoke about. But when you read this report, you will see the work that's being done in Whakatane with Ngāti Awa, where they have a community model which is triaging all of the calls which go to the National Call Centre and making judgments about how those calls will be responded to in their communities. OT is part of that group, but it is only a member. There are other agencies, other voices at the table, and other capabilities and connections into the community that enable action to be taken in real time that can make a meaningful difference to our children. And that is just one example. Ngāti Kahungunu are doing great work, as are many other iwi Māori around the country. So there is a real sense that we can do things differently. But we have to resource the model. We have to get the system aligned behind the model. And most importantly, we need as a community and as a country to recognise the urgency of this action and all commit ourselves to action.
Thanks, John. Now just open up to any questions that you might have.
Obviously one of the big sort of asterisks on this report is as it was being finalised, the government did finally accept all those recommendations,
Correct.
including mandatory reporting, which was one that originally was sort of put in the two-half basket. But do you have any confidence that the next time you are sat here means that things will have changed?
Not having a crystal ball challenging, but what I can commit to is that we will continue to look at this and report on progress. And that's about what progress looks like on the ground. And so it's really important that we keep reporting on the voices of experience to know whether things are actually changing. So yes, I'm a positive person, I'm hopeful, but this is a first step. And I think what I mentioned in my opening was a lot of those recommendations in Dame Karen's report are around how you identify harm occurring. And what we are saying in this report is that's part of the solution. But there's also this wider issue of having a comprehensive child protection system that can always respond and in the right way. And at the moment, we are not there. And the issue is how big is that gap and how long will it take for that gap to be closed?
I mean, I guess already Oranga Tamariki is struggling as it is. And I think the report acknowledges this, even if all the recommendations are implemented, it's going to become put even more workload on them. Is OT as it stands fit for purpose?
There's always going to be a place for a statutory child protection agency to do the work that they can do. And that's very much at the hard end, where the level of harm that children face requires a statutory intervention. What needs to happen, and what our report talks to, is about how do you build up and resource the community sector so they can respond to the reports of concern at a lower level, which enables them to go and visit whānau, get eyes on that child, complete a further safety check with the best information, but most importantly, attend to the needs of that whānau. So it could be making sure that they've got mental health, addiction services for them. It could be about how do you get education supports in place so that child can attend school. It could be as simple as getting kai on the table. So it's things like that that can actually prevent issues escalating and ultimately harm occurring to that child. And so in doing that model, it requires the support of all the government agencies to prioritise services to these families, but ultimately for these children. And you would hope, if that occurs, you'll see a reduced need for oranga tamarikis to step in at that kind of statutory intervention end.
Do you think those agencies are talking to each other? I mean, I think this report, Cora's report, Dame Karen's report, it's all silo, fragmented. What checks and balances can be put in to ensure, make them talk to each other?
Well, I mean, we are part of that check and balance. I mean, again, I think what you're seeing with the government's decision in October, we have a moment where there is a lot of attention on this as an issue, so there's a real opportunity. The question is that opportunity going to be realised? And that's what we will continue to look at. And in our various roles, ours to monitor progress, Claire's to be the advocate for change, and John to carry out his role in terms of investigations and managing complaints. Yeah.
I do think that there's some hope around collaboration. I think we are seeing ministers collaborating in this space. We are seeing agencies, the 10 major agencies working more closely together. So I do think that we are beginning to see the sorts of frameworks and the sorts of initiatives and the sorts of collaborations that can lead to different models and can lead to a more sustainable and effective system. But there's a long way to go, and it's urgent.
You said that 24 tamariki have sadly died in the last couple of years. Is there a clear picture at the moment of how many children are currently at risk, and has that improved at all in recent years?
It's quite a difficult question. I mean, I think what we're seeing is there's definitely an increase in the number of reports of concern that are being made to Oranga Tamariki. So it represents a 17% increase in the number of tamariki that are becoming known to them. And so that's over 60,000 children a year. So that is certainly increasing. Now, I don't have a view of how many of those would require Oranga Tamariki intervention. However, what I do know is that you've got professionals, police, education, health, all saying they are concerned, they're raising those concerns and they're not seeing action. So what they're saying is the threshold is too high for that statutory intervention. And then what you're also seeing from the community perspective is you've got providers who are faced with funding cuts that are still being asked to do a job sometimes that they're not funded for. Or alternatively, they are being referred cases that are too complex for them to manage and that they are having to refer back to for a statutory intervention from Oranga Tamariki. Yeah.
In terms of the resource gaps that you've spoken about as well, is that in funding, also in training for staff? What are sort of the gaps there in resourcing?
I can take the lead on that one. I think that resourcing is an issue across those different areas that you mentioned. It's clear from the report that Aroturu ki Tamariki has published today that this, as we said, is a system that is under strain. Oranga Tamariki, in its own report last year about responses to reports of concern, as I said at the time, was sounding the alarm itself about the resource pressures that it's under. So that's why you heard me say earlier today, I do think there needs to be a greater level investment into our child protection system to actually strengthen up and enable the system to do the work that it needs to do. I agree with Aaron that, that needs to be across the whole, so we need to start to see our child protection system as, yes, the agency, Oranga Tamariki, but it's much more than that. It's all of the partners that Oranga Tamariki works with across iwi, community, kaupapa Māori organisations, and then the wider children's system, those various government agencies that have responsibilities. And that resourcing needs to be seen in the whole, as well as Oranga Tamariki being well resourced to do its work. And then you mentioned about the importance of resourcing education and training. So that was one of Dame Karen Potasi's recommendations, to invest in mandatory training for all people who are working across our child protection system. As an oversight system, we cannot emphasise enough how important that mandatory education and training is. It needs to be high quality training, and it needs to be reaching as many of those people working across our child protection system as possible. They need to be equipped with good, consistent knowledge about knowing the signs of abuse and maltreatment of children and what to do in those situations. And there also needs to be better education and training about things like information sharing, working together in practical ways that actually put children's safety at the very centre of ways of working.
You note the benefits of sort of community-led initiatives. How much, without venturing into like a political opinion, those cuts to contractors will have created uncertainty in some of the goals towards closing these gaps? Obviously, they extended them out to 2027, but do you think that created uncertainty amongst agencies in being able to achieve these recommendations?
Yeah, I think, first of all, not all contracts were extended out. I think that's important to understand. But I think what you'll see in this report is the voices of people that are working in the system and saying that they are under-resourced, they are stretched, and that more resourcing is needed to help them. And I think, this gap in terms of the community's ability to partner with Oranga Tamariki and respond isn't one that's new. So it actually precedes the cuts that occurred. It's been called out previously over decades. So there's a much bigger issue here at play than just, what may have happened to contracts last year. Yep.
Claire, you mentioned that you'd be this afternoon sending a message to MPs highlighting what's in this report. Within that, will you be asking to address these resource gaps and possibly asking for further funding or any help from MPs?
Thanks, Tobias, for going back to that point. My letter this afternoon will send a clear message to all MPs across our Parliament of the urgent need to work together, to collaborate and to join up around strengthening the child protection system in New Zealand, because as Dame Karen made very clear in her report, the change needs to be enduring, and I could not agree with that more. She said that sustained, bold and determined action was needed, and so this afternoon in my letter I'll be making clear to MPs that I want to see them working together across party lines to make this commitment to strengthening our child protection system enduring. I'm also going to highlight the importance of resourcing and investment, and then I'll also make a call to action to those MPs to live their game when it comes to listening to children and young people who are in this system. They have the solutions for the things that need to change, and I believe those solutions are very well aligned to what we've seen in Dame Karen's recommendations, Coroner Anderson's recommendations, and so the pathway forward here is clear, but I do want to see support for that across the Parliament.
And the Dear Children campaign that's been running for a while now, which again touches on many of these issues, what sort of a response has there been across the country to that so far that you guys have seen?
Overall, the response has been incredibly heartening and supportive. I've had many contacts from members of the public throughout Aotearoa New Zealand telling me that that campaign has actually opened up conversations that have never happened in their families and whānau before, that it has helped to lift some of that taboo off this issue of child abuse in New Zealand. I've also heard directly from a range of children and young people, including those who have experienced family violence, sexual violence, that this campaign is something that they want to see. They want to see more New Zealanders support it, and I will be continuing to take the campaign proactively around New Zealand through my advocacy. It's absolutely clear, though, that we still have a long way to go until we are a country that collectively recognises this problem, that has a shared awareness and understanding of the problem and what to do if a child confides in you that they are experiencing harm. And so that's why on the Dear Children website we have a range of resources for people to help to equip them with growing that knowledge.
I guess is that a positive reinforcement, though, that you can put something like that out to the community level and still get a response that's outside of just the agencies like OT?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I think, as I said earlier, this is actually going to take us all at all levels of society. The report that you see here today is absolutely clear about the system level things that need to change across our children's system, but that has to be matched and happening alongside the societal and community level change.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
We'll call that a day. As I said, Claire and I will better stay on. Unfortunately, John's got another commitment, but if you do have some further questions, we're happy to answer those for you too. But thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.